Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm sure everybody is very activated now after we know where we come from, how old we are, and how big the cities are in which we live. As was said before, I am a researcher. So why am I actually here? Because I want to tell you about those things that we look at when it comes to social cohesion and acceptance of diversity, which is the reason we all came to this conference. Often we have a vague understanding of what we do might be good or bad, but we actually don't know if this is the truth. So this is what we as researchers are doing, and I hope I can give you some answers in the next few minutes. We all care about our local communities. We care about how people live together and how they interact with each other. Most of us work for prospering and peaceful neighborhoods, villages, if we live in small spaces, and cities. So in short, we care about the social cohesion of our societies. And this is exactly what I am here for today. I am passionate about this topic as well as the acceptance, diversity, and social cohesion. I want to tell you about my work and what my colleagues and I have found in the past years, because I truly believe that we can only make our communities better if we know more about the underlying mechanisms that influence our individual behavior and that of our societies as a whole. And now is the time to really work on making our communities better, safer, and more accepting places for everyone. Because what we have heard this morning is true. Various polarizing tendencies seem to cause tensions and growing divisions in our societies. Globalization, the rapidly changing ways of communicating through the internet, phenomena such as social media filter bubbles and hate speech are causing insecurities about what we should believe and what not. Everywhere in Europe, inequality, social exclusion, and poverty are on the rise. Increasing ethnic and religious diversity changes the composition of our neighborhoods, but it also changes the languages that we hear every day, the food that we eat, and the customs that we encounter. I hope this is working. Yes. So, at the same time, various groups and topics have become increasingly visible and central in the public discourse in many countries here in Europe and elsewhere in the world. The elderly, individuals with disabilities, the divide between rich and poor, gender roles and identities, as well as the demand of equal rights regardless of sexual orientation. While some accept or even embrace the increasing diversity and argue that it is a chance for our societies because it bears so many opportunities, as many of you here, others are hesitant or even hostile. Some, also among the ones in charge, even argue that increasing diversity endangers social cohesion because it is simply too much to handle. But how is diversity, or more specifically, the acceptance of diversity, actually related to social cohesion? To answer this question, we first have to get a common understanding of what social cohesion actually is. You see, I'm a scientist. I tried to get some definitions right first. We define social cohesion as, and now listen, the quality of social cooperation and togetherness in a geopolitical entity. Wow, this is a very big sentence. And whenever I read it out, I can never get it from the top of my head. I think this is big. I don't even understand half the words. This is classic for science too. So let's take a deep breath and try to get this a little bit simpler. In a cohesive society, people, number one, feel connected with each other and their society as a whole, right? Number two, they focus on the common good for everybody. And number three, and this is important for right now, they have strong social relations. Let's take a closer look at social relations and what they include. Social relations include the quality of our social networks with our friends, neighbors, or colleagues that we have at work. Also, they include the trust we have in others, both general as well as in people that we maybe meet on the street for the very first time. And then they also include the acceptance of diversity, meaning individuals with other lifestyles and values as equal members of our societies. So, okay, now we know how the acceptance of diversity is related to social cohesion. It's a very important part of it. So we can check the first box. To improve social cohesion, it is important to work on the acceptance of diversity. But we all know from our own work, from our own experience, that this is actually very challenging in many of the neighborhoods that we live in and work in. So what can we do to improve the acceptance of diversity? A very important question, also for science. But again, we have to tackle the basics first. What is diversity in our societies today? What does it actually mean? Often diversity is spontaneously associated with ethnic and religious differences. Often that's it. It doesn't go beyond. But just before this talk, during our little warm-up exercise, we realized that diversity can be so much more, and it is. We differ with regards to where we live, big city or countryside, with regards to our age, and many, many other features. We differ with regards to our personalities. We all have a unique setup of emotions, attitudes, experiences, behaviors, and life stories. But there are also characteristics that make us feel closer to some than to others, because those characteristics bear implications for how we are treated by society as a whole. And those are exactly the aspects of diversity that we were looking for when we started to investigate the acceptance of diversity in Germany, where I come from. But again, we ran into a very big problem. Science always runs into problems, of course. Many studies are offered by scientists that look into individual aspects of diversity, but unfortunately, we couldn't find a single one that has an approach that includes all relevant aspects of diversity in a society at the same time and helps to measure it. Therefore, we had to do it ourselves. What do scientists do? They dig deep in the literature, read a lot, run some studies, and then we had to test our assumptions to create a concept that includes all those aspects of diversity that are most prominent in today's everyday German and probably wider European society and context. As a result, we came up with a multidimensional concept that you can see on the wall, which is a model of acceptance of diversity with 7 dimensions. Age differences, disability, sexual orientation, ethnic origin, gender roles, poverty, and religion. If we now want to measure the acceptance of diversity in any given context among people, we have to ask them questions. We have to ask them questions that are representative of each of those 7 dimensions that you can see here. And that's what we actually did. So we took the phone, called 3,500 people, and talked with them for about 30 minutes. Of course, not personally, that would have been a very, very long study, but we did. And our first goal was to measure how strong the acceptance of diversity is right now, in this case in our German society. And the result was very, very interesting for us. Which groups are most accepted in society? By far, disability, up on the left, was most accepted, followed by sexual orientation, ethnic origin, age differences, and gender roles. So you see, it's actually how it goes along here on the screen. And then there came nothing for a while, before the last 2 dimensions, poverty and religion. So that was very interesting for us, because although poverty is on the rise and the divide between rich and poor becomes bigger, socioeconomic weakness is one of the least accepted dimensions of diversity that we found. It was only followed by religion. And here I would really like to stress a very important point. We asked people about their attitudes about religion in general and included the 3 biggest world religions. So the result has nothing to do with a specific group, but with hesitation towards religion in general. Okay, so now we know which dimensions of diversity are relevant and salient today and which are more or less accepted. Checkbox number 2. But that, again, does not tell us anything about how to improve the acceptance of diversity, right? So we know the status quo, but what does this actually mean for our communities? This is a very difficult riddle to solve. Many have tried it so far, and it's really not easy. To get a better understanding for this question, we took a look at the factors that at least go along with the different dimensions of diversity. And I will only mention a few relevant factors here. You might find yourself that some of those resonate with you in your work. First, let's take a look at the society as a whole. We find that acceptance of diversity is higher in places where the economy is strong and prosperous. Probably not a very big surprise, and often very sad if we say, well, we are just not strong and prosperous, so what can we do? The next result probably is a little bit more surprising for you. At least it was for us at the beginning, even shocking, so to say. Acceptance of diversity, we find, is also higher in places with more income inequality. More inequality. How can that be? Well, we thought about it, and a possible explanation is that diversity can only be accepted where it is also experienced in some way. Places that are so homogeneous might just not have this experience, and therefore people do not need to learn the skills necessary to accept it. This is a first hint that experiences matter, as we have heard today already. Now let's look at factors that I would like to group under the headline of modernization. We find that acceptance of diversity is higher in places with larger proportions of young people. So it's so good that we all meet here today. And it's good, and also it's higher in places where more people have access to high-speed internet. In contrast to public discourse, this means that the internet does not create loneliness and isolation. In contrast, when it comes to the acceptance of diversity, it can be a tool to connect with people, to learn about others, and we should make use of this tool. Finally, we found two psychological factors in the individual that are especially relevant when it comes to working in local communities and neighborhoods. First, empathy. We found that higher levels of empathy go along with higher levels of acceptance of diversity. We all know that fostering empathy is really not very easy, but you probably know from your own experience and work that it pays off to step in someone else's shoes, relate to their feelings, and take their perspectives. The second factor is intergroup anxiety, and we have heard about this morning as well. People who are afraid of any kind of otherness tend to accept diversity less. Helping those people by understanding where they're coming from and by creating positive encounters is a key factor to improve the acceptance of diversity. I know that many of you are working hard to accomplish this goal, and often this is not very much appreciated. But from our work, I can tell you it is more than worth what you are doing in this field. So what do we know by now? We know that the acceptance of diversity is stronger in places that are wealthier, where we do find income inequality, in places with many young people and access to high-speed internet. And we know that, among others, empathy and intergroup anxiety play a vital role for the acceptance of diversity. Checkbox number 3. So if we want to increase the acceptance of diversity, maybe even among those who tend to be more hesitant, where do we start? And I'm coming to my last point now. Our research comes to a very clear conclusion, and you probably all know this, but sometimes it's also good to hear it from science that it's proven. It's the neighborhood. But how do we know? Because we looked at people's attitudes towards our 7 groups that you find on the wall behind or in front of you. And we wanted to know if their attitudes towards, say, poor, lesbians, or unemployed differed depending on the level of personal distance from each other. We distinguished between the general attitude, having those people as neighbors, and most intimate as family members. The results were incredibly clear. Even the groups with very low levels of acceptance were least rejected on the level of the neighborhood. Put differently, the attitudes towards pretty much any kind of diversity is most positive on the neighborhood level. This means that the neighborhood offers the potential to overcome reservations, rejections, and even prejudice. While people can keep their personal distance here, it is also the place where they come into contact with each other. Sometimes they don't even have a choice. Making those encounters positive and worthwhile can therefore help to improve the acceptance of diversity and further overcome intergroup anxiety and even create empathy. The neighborhood is the key. So what you're doing, again, is important and it is right. And now, let me be a scientist for one more time and ask one or actually 2 last questions. Why do we care about the acceptance of diversity? Why do we care about social cohesion? Why do we? Why does it matter? Does it matter? And again, science can give you a very good answer. Yes, it does matter very, very much. In our studies, we consistently find that where acceptance of diversity as well as social cohesion are higher, people are happier, healthier, and more satisfied with their lives. And what could be a better start for a future in a diverse society that is characterized by respect for and acceptance of each other than citizens who are happier, healthier, and more satisfied? I'm very much looking forward to the next 2 days full of discussions, sparkling inputs, and inspiring projects that all of you conducted that will help us to generate ideas for making our communities more cohesive and accepting. Thank you very much.